Welcome Dikembe to this episode. We're going to discuss more about the Raila Odinga digital team, which you have been part of, part of for quite a long time. And so, my first question to you is that there's, I've heard it around, and there have been claims um, that traditional Raila Odinga online supporters, they're often called bloggers, have been sidelined, and formerly Jubilee bloggers are now in charge. Like recently, we saw when Raila Odinga went to the UK, he was accompanied by Pauline Njoroge. So what do you think about this? Because if you look at people like Pauline Njoroge 5 years ago or so, they were in charge of very vile propaganda against Raila Odinga. What do you think about them now being at the forefront of our campaigns and against some of us who remained loyal and who've championed for our cause for the longest time?
I think the unique thing about Raila Odinga is that he feels comfortable with anyone. So, and I don't think that he took any personal grudge against any young person who was supporting Uhuru Kenyatta. Whatever, it doesn't matter whatever they were spewing, because politics happens in a context. Bloggers or social media users, especially those who are retained by political parties or campaign groups, they post whatever they post, they tweet whatever they tweet, they write whatever they write within that context. So you cannot remove the context, the political context, from the comments of individual bloggers or social media users. In the case of Pauline Njoroge going to the UK with Jacom, in a campaign, it's the candidate to decide whom he wants to do certain roles. And Raila Odinga is very good at knowing what roles each person can play. The historical bloggers of Raila Odinga and social media users, most of them are still within the campaign of Raila Odinga, and they have more or less welcomed the new arrangement with its because it broadens. We are all fighting for the same end, so any means is justifiable.
Okay, thank you for that. You are one of the oldest Raila Odinga digital warriors, and with a history, of course, of incarceration and trouble with the government and all that in your quest. So, how often do you get to meet Raila Odinga to get his thoughts, and how often does his digital team get to meet him? Because as I've heard about our main opponents, is that like William Ruto, who is our main opponent, gets to meet his media team frequently, and even before public engagements, rallies, he gets to meet his photographers so that they decide angles at which they will take. He rehearses with his media team, the likes of Lenny Situmbi. So how often does this happen in our side of politics?
Political candidates adopt communication plans that serve their best interests. So for William Ruto, maybe that is his best decision to constantly engage his team. On our side, I think that, and for me as a person, I sat with Raila Odinga down way back, and I understood the man and his cause. So it doesn't really bother me if I don't meet him, because I know there are thousands, almost millions of young people who also have never met Raila Odinga in person, and they still support him. But I've had the privilege in several occasions to meet Raila Odinga, and I think that I understand the man and his quest, so I do not have to, like in this particular environment, to constantly meet Raila Odinga. The other thing is that there are people who've joined the campaign, calling people would refer to as communications professionals. So they do much of the output for the campaign. The only thing I would want to, I always like cautioning people is to label, to brand others as bloggers and others as experts and whatever dichotomy you want to create, because the mistake people make in our side of politics is to think that some of us come to the scene with nothing. You know, we also went to school. We have a very deep knowledge of the professions we studied. I meet people in Raila's blogosphere, in Raila online circles, people who have different academic backgrounds. I know of lawyers who are, being branded as bloggers. I know of, economists, young people who went to the university and studied economics and they are good at it, they know it. Young people went to study health sciences or social sciences. Others who studied engineering. All these people, the only reason they are being branded as bloggers is because they support Raila Odinga in social media. So I think that dichotomy sometimes creates the attitude that the people who are around Raila Odinga and who should ideally organize his communications then adopt to try to departmentalize people, that these ones are professionals and these ones are bloggers. But I tend to think that so long as each group is pursuing the same cause, it doesn't matter what you're labeled.
Okay, so while it is true that the bloggers or social media enthusiasts who support Raila Odinga don't have to meet him, but do you think that we need to establish a central unit that will coordinate our communications in this election? Because as you've realized, there's a lot of disjointed communication, so that sometimes news is not central. Like, for example, when Baba was in the UK, people who think they are insiders maybe didn't have the information, while other people who may be seen as at the periphery had the information. Another thing is that the kind of communication that we're seeing, and even coming from platforms that are verified for Raila Odinga, what do you think about them? For example, the use of Sheng in his platforms. Do you think that is the key language that we need to communicate to young people in this election? Do you think we need to mobilize them around Sheng, or we need to create some formidable network of young people around that will coalesce around us because of policy issues? Because, like, I think one of the major concerns for young people in this election is the issue of economics. How do you think we should address this in terms of communication, so that young people can identify with Raila Odinga, not because he can't speak in Sheng as is portrayed by people running in social media, but around a certain policy issue?
I believe that young people can and do understand policy language. Kenya's curriculum is taught in English fairly from a very young age, so people grow up learning proper English. And I've quarreled privately with these making Raila Odinga pages to be platforms for that kind of language, that kind of, you know, urban Sheng language. But I'm being told, I've been informed that there is a demographic that language appeals to. So that is why they do it. That there is this demographic that Sheng language appeals to. I have my differences, I have my quarrels with that, but that is the decision that has been made. More broadly, though, I think that in this election, young people are not as superficial as they want to be presented. And I think Ruto gets it right when he insists on concrete, hardcore economic messaging, as opposed to these, this superficial, make me feel good messaging that has been adopted on Raila Odinga's official handles. I do not want to say that that is entirely, that having posts in Sheng is entirely wrong, but I tend to think that it has taken the language of Raila Odinga out of the conversation, so that people do not feel that they are engaging Raila Odinga the person. Most people now feel like they're engaging some excited younglings or some interns at Azimio Presidential Secretariat who are, running Raila Odinga's social media pages the way they wish. I've followed other presidential campaigns for older politicians, and I have never seen the formalization of of that kind of language as the mainstream language of political communication in their public spaces. If you look, for instance, if you go to the Zambian election, which was won by a relatively older politician, he stuck to a formal mainstream messaging without trying to overly pander to a demographic that is believed to only listen to Sheng. I tend to think that young people in this country are not so superficial. I mean, they live in Kenya and they want presidential candidates to address the economic issues of the day in a language that does not, make them appear as some clones who cannot understand the real issues.
Okay, so if we're supposed to look at other elections and draw parallels, we have Bernie Sanders in the United States and even Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. Young people, they're relatively older, and I think they were older than Raila Odinga, but they were able to marshal young people better than any other candidate. So what lessons can we learn from these top politicians, and what promise can we give in terms of communication to the young people, so that young people identify with Raila Odinga despite of his age, not sounding like aping young people by wearing shoes which are predominantly worn by young people, or creating a Raila Odinga that speaks in Sheng. What do you think what lessons can we draw from these politicians?
There's a theory in communications that explains how people process new information, and this theory posits that some people process new information through a peripheral route and others through a central route, in the sense that those who process information through peripheral routes would only focus on what that the way that information is packaged for their emotional needs. So if, for instance, somebody is wearing a new modern shoes or a new style, or what essentially has been adopted by Raila Communications team is that the campaign largely wants to appeal to people's emotions and stuff. On the other hand, there is a persuasion through the central route where you present people with hard facts, whether it is facts on their social well-being, on the economics, generally you present the hard facts the way they are, and you appeal to somebody's logic, that this is the state of the economy, this is how it arrived at this point, this is what I want us, this is how I want us to move forward, this is how I see you, this is what I hope for you, this is what I want to do for you. Hard facts. And that is where manifestos come in, that is where blueprints come in, that is where economic speeches or economic plans come in. So candidates have to decide which route they want to use for persuasion, and it is clear how each side has made that decision.
Okay, so what will be your advice to the very core team that is managing Raila Odinga's communications?
That they go slow on the peripheral route. That this campaign has been framed in such a way that you have to respond concretely, and you have to tell young people more seriously. You have to come out as a more serious leader in how you engage with young people online. To focus purely on urban language misses several points. One, it misses the point that Kenyan youths are drawn from different demographics, both economic and social, and most of them, majority of young people, have not been trained in the kind of, say, Dandora Sheng or Madare Sheng or Kibera Sheng or Kawangware Sheng or whatever that can do.
And sometimes the Sheng that is spoken in Kawangware may be different with the Sheng that is spoken in Kibra.
Yeah, and it's completely different with the language that young people use, say, in Nakuru or in Mombasa or in Narok or in Kisii or in Eldoret. So what for me is encompassing is the normal language. If, for instance, I was having a conversation in, say, Raila Odinga, what language will that conversation proceed on? Will it be on Sheng, or will it be on just concrete stuff? And I think that is how you need to look at young people, that there's a generation that has at least they have basic knowledge of things, and you have to take that into cognizance.
Okay, then thank you for your views today. We can catch up some other time on other pertinent issues in this election.